Have you ever noticed how the moment you become emotionally available to someone, they seem to vanish into thin air? How the very act of showing genuine interest triggers an almost primal retreat in the person you're drawn to. You've probably been told it's about playing hard to get, about games and manipulation tactics. But here's what no one tells you. You're actually triggering one of the most ancient psychological patterns Carl Jung identified in the human psyche, and it's destroying your ability to create genuine connection. The truth is, there's a specific emotional trigger that immediately signals to someone's unconscious mind that you are not the one they will pursue. This isn't about being needy or desperate. Women who appear perfectly confident and independent trigger this same response without even realizing it. It's embedded so deeply in our psychological architecture that even Jung himself wrote about how this pattern governs every romantic dynamic you'll ever experience. What if everything you believe about attraction is actually working against you? What if the very emotions you've been taught to express, the ones that feel most natural and authentic, are the exact emotions that activate what Jung called the archetypal avoidance pattern in masculine psychology? Here's what's terrifying. You're probably triggering this emotional shutdown in every person you're genuinely interested in, and you have no idea you're doing it. The more authentic you become, the more you activate their psychological defense systems. The more you try to connect, the more you push them into what Jung identified as the anima withdrawal state. But here's what's fascinating. Once you understand the psychological mechanism Jung uncovered, you can literally reverse this pattern. You can learn to trigger the exact opposite emotional state, the one that creates what Jung called archetypal magnetic pursuit. And the women who understand this, they never have to chase anyone again. If you've ever felt confused about why someone pulls away just when things seem to be getting deeper, hit that subscribe button, because what we're about to explore will completely change how you understand human connection. You're not imagining this pattern. Your instincts are correct. There is something happening beneath the surface of every romantic interaction, and Jung's research into the collective unconscious revealed exactly what it is. Let's dive into the psychology that's been controlling your love life without your awareness. You know that moment when you're texting someone and you can literally feel their energy shift? When what started as playful banter suddenly becomes one-word responses and delayed replies. When someone who was actively pursuing you suddenly becomes mysteriously busy and unavailable. You've experienced this pattern and you've probably blamed yourself for it. Here's what no one validates. You're not crazy. You're not imagining the energetic shift. You're not reading too much into the situation. What you're experiencing is what Carl Jung identified as the anima-animus dynamic, a psychological pattern that governs every romantic interaction between masculine and feminine energies. And you've been unknowingly triggering the exact emotional response that shuts down pursuit behavior. The conventional advice tells you to be yourself, to be authentic, to show your interest. But what psychology reveals is that there's a specific emotional frequency that immediately signals to someone's unconscious mind that you are not the person they will chase. Jung called this the availability paradox. The more emotionally available you become, the more you activate their psychological retreat mechanisms. Research in attachment psychology shows that this pattern is hardwired into our nervous systems. When you express certain emotions that feel completely natural and appropriate, you're actually triggering what Jung identified as the archetypal mother complex in masculine psychology. This isn't about being motherly or nurturing. This is about triggering an unconscious association with safety, predictability, and the absence of challenge. But here's where it gets fascinating. The women who naturally inspire pursuit behavior aren't necessarily more attractive, more intelligent, or more interesting. They're simply not triggering this specific emotional shutdown. They understand, either consciously or unconsciously, how to maintain what Jung called anima activation, the psychological state that creates magnetic attraction. Jung's research revealed that masculine psychology is programmed to pursue what feels slightly out of reach, not because of games or manipulation, but because of an archetypal pattern that associates challenge with value. When you trigger emotions of safety and predictability, you're actually moving yourself out of the anima projection zone, the psychological space where someone experiences you as the feminine ideal they want to pursue. This isn't about playing hard to get or being artificially unavailable. This is about understanding the specific emotional triggers that activate or deactivate pursuit behavior in the human psyche. Jung discovered that there are certain emotional frequencies that immediately signal to someone's unconscious mind, "This person is not the one I will chase." The women who understand this create what Jung called archetypal tension. They maintain an emotional frequency that keeps them in the pursuit zone without manipulation or games. They never have to wonder if someone is interested because they're naturally triggering the psychological states that create magnetic attraction. If you've ever noticed this pattern in your own relationships, drop a comment below with just your country. I want to see how universal this experience really is. The truth is, you've been unconsciously participating in a psychological dynamic that Jung mapped out decades ago. And once you understand the specific emotional trigger that shuts down pursuit behavior, you can learn to avoid it completely. Carl Jung's breakthrough research into the collective unconscious revealed something revolutionary about human attraction. We don't choose who we pursue based on logic or compatibility. We're driven by archetypal patterns embedded so deeply in our psyche that they operate completely below conscious awareness. Jung identified what he called the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine archetypes that exist within every person's unconscious mind. Here's what Jung discovered. When a man encounters a woman, his unconscious mind immediately begins comparing her to his internal anima, his archetypal feminine ideal. This isn't about physical appearance or personality traits. This is about emotional frequency. The anima represents the mysterious, the unattainable, the divine feminine that exists just beyond reach. When you trigger emotions that align with this archetypal pattern, you activate what Jung called anima projection, the psychological state where someone experiences you as the embodiment of their unconscious feminine ideal. But here's where most women unknowingly sabotage themselves. They trigger what Jung identified as the mother archetype instead of the anima. The mother archetype represents safety, nurturing, predictability, and emotional availability. While these are beautiful qualities, they activate completely different psychological circuits. When you trigger the mother archetype, you move out of the pursuit zone and into the comfort zone. Jung's research revealed that the anima is characterized by mystery, emotional depth, and what he called numinous quality, a sense of spiritual or magical significance. Women who naturally inspire pursuit behavior maintain this numinous quality. They exist in what Jung called the transcendent function, the psychological space between known and unknown, available and unavailable, familiar and mysterious. Neuroscience research has validated Jung's insights. When someone encounters a person who triggers their anima archetype, their brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward anticipation and pursuit behavior. But when you trigger the mother archetype, their brain releases oxytocin and serotonin, chemicals associated with bonding and relaxation but not pursuit. This is why the advice to be yourself often backfires. Your authentic self might naturally trigger comfort and safety, but comfort and safety shut down the psychological mechanisms that create chase behavior. Jung understood that attraction isn't about being good or bad, worthy or unworthy. It's about triggering specific archetypal patterns in someone's unconscious mind. Jung identified what he called the individuation process, the psychological journey toward wholeness and self-realization. Women who understand this process naturally maintain what Jung called psychological autonomy. They're not seeking completion from someone else because they're actively engaged in their own psychological development. This autonomy creates what Jung called magnetic tension, the sense that they're complete unto themselves but open to connection. The women who naturally inspire pursuit behavior embody what Jung called the autonomous anima. They represent the feminine ideal while maintaining their own psychological independence. They don't need to be pursued, which paradoxically makes them more attractive to pursue. They exist in what Jung called the transcendent function, the psychological space that bridges opposites and creates transformation. Here's what Jung discovered about the pursuit dynamic. Masculine psychology is programmed to pursue what will facilitate psychological growth and individuation. When you trigger emotions of comfort and safety, you're signaling to someone's unconscious mind that you won't facilitate their psychological development. But when you maintain the anima frequency, you're signaling that connection with you will lead to transformation and growth. If this is resonating with you so far, hit that like button. Jung's insights about the unconscious mind get even more fascinating from here. Jung's research revealed that the anima isn't just about romantic attraction. It's about the psychological drive toward wholeness and self-realization. When you understand how to maintain the anima frequency, you're not just inspiring romantic pursuit. You're positioning yourself as a catalyst for someone's psychological and spiritual development. And that's the kind of attraction that creates lasting, transformative connection. Now we arrive at the psychological mechanism that Jung identified as the primary destroyer of pursuit behavior. After decades of research into the collective unconscious, Jung discovered that there's one specific emotional frequency that immediately signals to someone's unconscious mind that you are not the person they will chase. He called this the maternal transference trigger, and it's so subtle that even psychologically aware women activate it without realizing. The fatal emotional trigger is what Jung identified as caretaking energy, the unconscious emotional frequency that signals you're taking responsibility for someone else's emotional well-being. This isn't about being nurturing or caring. This is about energetically positioning yourself as the person who will manage, fix, or emotionally regulate another person. The moment you emit this frequency, you trigger what Jung called the mother complex activation in masculine psychology. Here's what makes this so insidious. Caretaking energy often emerges from genuinely loving intentions. You see someone struggling and your natural instinct is to help. You notice they're having a difficult day and you want to make it better. You sense emotional distance and you try to bridge it with reassurance and availability. But Jung's research revealed that this energy immediately moves you out of the anima archetype and into the mother archetype. When you trigger the mother complex, you activate what Jung called the psychological regression response. Instead of seeing you as the mysterious feminine ideal they want to pursue, they unconsciously begin relating to you as the maternal figure who will take care of their emotional needs. This creates what Jung identified as pursuit paralysis, the psychological state where someone becomes emotionally dependent on you while simultaneously losing romantic interest. The neuroscience behind this is fascinating. When you emit caretaking energy, you trigger the release of oxytocin and endorphins in the other person's brain, chemicals associated with maternal bonding and comfort. But these same chemicals suppress testosterone and dopamine, the neurotransmitters that drive pursuit behavior. You're literally chemically castrating their attraction to you through your caretaking energy. Jung discovered that masculine psychology is programmed to pursue what will challenge them to grow, not what will comfort them in their current state. When you take responsibility for someone's emotional well-being, you're removing the psychological tension that creates attraction. You're signaling to their unconscious mind that you're the person who will enable their current patterns, not challenge them to evolve. This shows up in countless ways that seem completely innocent. Asking, "How was your day?" with genuine concern triggers caretaking energy. Trying to cheer someone up when they're in a bad mood triggers caretaking energy. Offering solutions to their problems triggers caretaking energy. Being consistently available and emotionally supportive triggers caretaking energy. Even expressing worry about their well-being triggers caretaking energy. The women who naturally inspire pursuit behavior maintain what Jung called emotional autonomy. They care about people without taking responsibility for their emotional states. They can witness someone struggle without feeling compelled to fix it. They offer support without taking on the role of emotional caretaker. They maintain their own emotional center regardless of what's happening with the other person. Jung's research revealed that the anima archetype is characterized by emotional depth and mystery, not emotional caretaking. The anima represents the feminine force that inspires growth and transformation through her very being, not through her actions or efforts. When you shift into caretaking energy, you move out of being and into doing, and doing immediately triggers the mother complex. Here's what's particularly challenging about this pattern. Caretaking energy often increases in direct proportion to your interest in someone. The more you care about someone, the more likely you are to take responsibility for their emotional well-being. The more invested you become, the more you want to support and help them. But Jung's research shows that this creates an inverse relationship between your emotional investment and their romantic interest. The fatal emotional trigger isn't about being cold or uncaring. It's about maintaining what Jung called psychological boundaries, the energetic separation between your emotional well-being and someone else's. When you maintain these boundaries, you stay in the anima archetype. When you blur these boundaries through caretaking energy, you trigger the mother complex and destroy pursuit behavior. If you've ever noticed yourself naturally wanting to help or support someone you're attracted to, leave a comment below. This pattern is about to make so much sense. Understanding this emotional trigger is the first step toward maintaining the psychological frequency that naturally inspires pursuit behavior. But awareness alone isn't enough. You need to understand the specific emotional state that Jung identified as the antidote to caretaking energy. Jung's research revealed that the anima archetype, the feminine ideal that exists in the collective unconscious, embodies a very specific emotional frequency that naturally triggers pursuit behavior. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about understanding and embodying the archetypal feminine qualities that inspire transformation and growth in others. The anima represents what Jung called the transcendent feminine, the woman who facilitates psychological and spiritual development through her very presence. The anima archetype is characterized by what Jung called numinous mystery, a quality of depth and unknowability that suggests infinite layers of discovery. Women who embody this archetype maintain what Jung identified as psychological autonomy. They exist as complete individuals who don't need external validation or emotional regulation. They're not seeking completion from others because they're actively engaged in their own individuation process. Here's what Jung discovered about the anima frequency. It's characterized by emotional depth without emotional dependency. The anima represents the feminine force that can hold space for profound emotion while maintaining her own psychological center. She doesn't take on other people's emotional states, but she can witness and honor them without being destabilized. This creates what Jung called sacred container energy, the psychological space where others feel safe to be authentic without feeling energetically consumed. The anima archetype embodies what Jung called creative tension. She maintains an emotional frequency that's simultaneously warm and mysterious, available and autonomous, nurturing and challenging. She doesn't make herself smaller to accommodate others' comfort levels, but she also doesn't use her power to manipulate or control. She exists in what Jung called the transcendent function, the psychological space that bridges opposites and creates transformation. Women who naturally inspire pursuit behavior understand what Jung called receptive feminine power. They receive others' energy without absorbing it, they honor others' experience without taking responsibility for it, and they offer their presence without sacrificing their autonomy. They maintain what Jung identified as emotional sovereignty, the ability to remain centered in their own emotional experience regardless of what's happening around them. The anima frequency is also characterized by what Jung called archetypal depth, a connection to the deeper layers of feminine wisdom that transcend individual personality. Women who embody this archetype don't just relate to others on a surface level, they connect with the archetypal patterns that govern human behavior. They understand that attraction isn't personal, it's archetypal. They're not trying to be liked or chosen. They're embodying the feminine qualities that naturally inspire growth and transformation. Jung discovered that the anima archetype is inherently creative and transformative. She doesn't maintain the status quo, she catalyzes change and evolution. When you embody the anima frequency, you're not just inspiring romantic pursuit, you're inspiring psychological and spiritual development. You become what Jung called a transformation catalyst, someone whose very presence facilitates growth and individuation in others. This is why the anima archetype is so magnetic. She represents the possibility of becoming more than who you currently are. She doesn't offer comfort in your current state. She offers inspiration to evolve into your highest potential. Masculine psychology is programmed to pursue this transformative feminine energy because it facilitates the individuation process that Jung identified as the core drive of human development. The anima frequency is also characterized by what Jung called sacred sexuality, a connection to the life force energy that creates and sustains existence. This isn't about being sexual or seductive. It's about embodying the creative feminine principle that gives birth to new possibilities. Women who maintain this frequency are connected to their own life force energy, which makes them naturally magnetic to others seeking vitality and inspiration. Jung's research revealed that the anima archetype maintains what he called psychological virginity, a quality of being untouched by others' projections and expectations. She knows who she is independent of external validation, and she maintains this self-knowledge regardless of how others respond to her. This psychological virginity creates what Jung called magnetic autonomy, the quality of being completely self-contained while remaining open to connection. The practical embodiment of the anima frequency involves what Jung called conscious femininity, the ability to access and express the full spectrum of feminine archetypal energy. This includes the nurturing mother, the passionate lover, the wise crone, and the wild woman. But unlike unconscious femininity, which get stuck in one archetypal pattern, conscious femininity can access different aspects of the feminine as situations require. Women who embody the anima frequency maintain what Jung called emotional fluidity. They can feel deeply without being overwhelmed, they can care without caretaking, and they can love without losing themselves. They understand that their emotional capacity is a gift to be shared, not a resource to be depleted. They maintain their emotional center while remaining open to authentic connection. If you're starting to recognize the difference between caretaking energy and anima energy, share this video with someone who needs to understand this distinction. Jung's psychology applies to everyone. The anima archetype isn't about perfection or spiritual bypassing. It's about psychological integration and authentic feminine power. When you embody this frequency, you naturally inspire others to become their highest selves, and pursuit behavior becomes a natural byproduct of this transformative presence. Modern neuroscience has validated Jung's insights about the unconscious dynamics of attraction by revealing the specific brain mechanisms that govern pursuit behavior. When someone encounters a person who triggers their anima archetype, their brain undergoes a complex neurochemical cascade that creates what researchers call reward anticipation addiction, the neurological state that drives persistent pursuit behavior. The process begins in the brain's reward system, specifically the ventral tegmental area and nucleus accumbens. When you embody the anima frequency, you trigger the release of dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with motivation, reward anticipation, and goal-directed behavior. But here's what makes this fascinating. Dopamine isn't released when someone gets what they want. It's released in anticipation of potentially getting what they want. This is why the anima archetype's natural mystery and autonomy create such powerful attraction. Research in attachment neuroscience shows that when you trigger caretaking energy, you activate completely different brain circuits. The caregiving system releases oxytocin and vasopressin, chemicals associated with bonding and attachment, but not pursuit. These neurochemicals create feelings of safety and comfort, but they suppress the dopamine system that drives romantic pursuit. You're literally chemically shifting someone out of attraction mode and into attachment mode. The anima frequency activates what neuroscientists call the seeking system, the brain circuit that drives exploration, curiosity, and the pursuit of rewarding experiences. This system is powered by dopamine and is associated with increased focus, energy, and motivation. When you maintain psychological autonomy and emotional mystery, you keep this system activated. When you shift into caretaking energy, you deactivate it. Mirror neuron research reveals another crucial mechanism. Humans unconsciously mirror the emotional states of people they're interacting with. When you embody emotional autonomy and self-containment, you trigger mirror neurons that activate similar states in others. They begin to feel more autonomous and self-contained in your presence. But when you emit caretaking energy, you trigger mirror neurons that activate dependency and emotional neediness. The brain's default mode network, the neural network associated with self-reflection and meaning-making, also plays a crucial role in attraction. When you embody the anima frequency, you trigger what neuroscientists call transcendent states, altered states of consciousness associated with spiritual experiences and personal transformation. These states are highly addictive because they facilitate psychological growth and self-actualization. Neuroscience research on the feminine brain reveals that women naturally have more developed neural networks for emotional processing and interpersonal connection. But this neurological gift can become a liability when it leads to emotional over-involvement. The anima frequency requires what neuroscientists call emotional regulation, the ability to feel deeply while maintaining neural pathways associated with self-awareness and autonomy. The stress response system also plays a crucial role in attraction dynamics. When you take responsibility for someone else's emotional well-being, you activate your sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight response that triggers cortisol release. This stress response is contagious through mirror neurons and pheromones. Others unconsciously sense your stress and begin to associate you with activated nervous system states. The anima frequency, by contrast, is associated with what neuroscientists call parasympathetic activation, the rest and digest response that promotes healing, creativity, and connection. When you maintain emotional autonomy, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which creates a neurological field that others find calming and attractive. You become associated with peace and well-being rather than stress and anxiety. Research in interpersonal neurobiology shows that the anima frequency creates what scientists call neural resonance, a state where two people's brain waves begin to synchronize in beneficial ways. This creates feelings of deep connection and understanding without the energy drain associated with caretaking dynamics. The other person feels understood and seen without feeling energetically consumed. If you've ever noticed how different people make you feel different ways just by being around them, you're experiencing these neurological mechanisms in action. Drop a comment if this is making sense. Understanding these neurological mechanisms empowers you to consciously create the brain states that naturally inspire pursuit behavior. It's not about manipulation. It's about understanding how to embody the feminine frequency that facilitates psychological and spiritual development in others. Now that you understand the psychological and neurological mechanisms behind Jung's insights, let's explore how to practically embody the anima frequency in your daily interactions. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about accessing the archetypal feminine qualities that already exist within you and learning to express them in ways that naturally inspire pursuit behavior. The first step is developing what Jung called emotional sovereignty, the ability to maintain your emotional center regardless of what's happening around you. This begins with recognizing when you're starting to emit caretaking energy. Notice the subtle moment when you feel responsible for someone else's emotional state. Notice when you want to fix, help, or make someone feel better. These impulses aren't bad, but they immediately shift you out of the anima frequency. Instead of trying to manage someone else's emotional experience, practice what Jung called witnessing consciousness, the ability to hold space for others' emotions without absorbing them. When someone shares a problem with you, resist the urge to offer solutions or reassurance. Instead, simply reflect what you're hearing. It sounds like you're really struggling with this, or I can hear how frustrated you are. This maintains the anima frequency of depth and understanding without triggering the mother complex. Develop what Jung called psychological boundaries, the energetic separation between your well-being and others' well-being. This means caring about people without taking responsibility for their emotional states. You can have compassion for someone's struggle without feeling compelled to fix it. You can offer support without sacrificing your own emotional center. Practice saying, I hear you instead of, let me help you. The anima frequency also requires what Jung called mystery maintenance, the ability to remain emotionally available while maintaining psychological autonomy. This doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means not revealing everything about yourself immediately. Maintain layers of depth that can be discovered over time. Share your thoughts and feelings authentically, but don't feel compelled to explain yourself or justify your perspectives. Practice what Jung called receptive feminine power, the ability to receive others' energy without absorbing it. When someone is upset, stressed, or struggling, practice remaining calm and centered in your own energy. Don't try to match their emotional state or take on their problems. Instead, maintain your own emotional frequency and allow them to find their center in your presence. Develop what Jung called creative tension, the ability to be simultaneously warm and mysterious, available and autonomous. This means being genuinely interested in others while maintaining your own interests and priorities. You can care about someone's day without making their day more important than your own. You can be supportive without being constantly available. The anima frequency is also expressed through what Jung called archetypal depth, connecting with others on deeper levels than surface personality. Instead of focusing on daily events and surface-level concerns, explore themes of meaning, growth, and transformation. Ask questions that invite others to reflect on their deeper experiences. What's been teaching you the most about yourself lately? Or, how are you growing through this experience? Practice what Jung called emotional fluidity, the ability to feel deeply while maintaining emotional regulation. This means allowing yourself to experience the full spectrum of emotions without being overwhelmed by them. You can feel sad without becoming depressed, angry without becoming aggressive, or passionate without becoming obsessive. This emotional mastery is inherently attractive because it demonstrates psychological maturity. Maintain what Jung called life force connection, a relationship with your own creative and vital energy. This means prioritizing activities that feed your soul and expand your consciousness. Engage in creative pursuits, spend time in nature, explore spiritual practices, or pursue learning that excites you. When you're connected to your own life force, you naturally radiate the vitality that others find magnetic. The anima frequency also involves what Jung called future orientation, focusing on growth and possibility rather than problems and limitations. When someone shares struggles with you, help them envision their potential rather than analyzing their problems. Ask, what would this situation look like if it were teaching you something important? Or, how do you want to grow through this experience? Finally, practice what Jung called sacred self-care, taking responsibility for your own emotional and spiritual well-being. This means recognizing that your emotional state is your responsibility, not something others need to manage. When you maintain your own emotional center, you give others permission to do the same. If you're recognizing patterns in your own behavior that you want to shift, the next video breaks down specific scenarios and how to navigate them using Jung's principles. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. These practices aren't about perfection. They're about conscious embodiment of the feminine archetypal qualities that naturally inspire growth and transformation in others. Let's examine how Jung's principles play out in real-world scenarios, so you can recognize these patterns in your own interactions and understand how to maintain the anima frequency even in challenging situations. Consider Sarah, a 28-year-old marketing professional who consistently found herself in the same frustrating pattern. Men would pursue her intensely for a few weeks, then gradually lose interest just as she began to feel genuinely connected. Using Jung's framework, we can identify exactly what was happening. Sarah naturally embodied many anima qualities. She was creative, emotionally intelligent, and spiritually curious. But the moment she felt attracted to someone, she would unconsciously shift into caretaking energy. When David, a software engineer, mentioned feeling stressed about a work project, Sarah immediately offered to help him research solutions. When he seemed distant during a text conversation, she tried to cheer him up with encouraging messages. When he had a difficult day, she made dinner plans to distract him from his problems. Each of these responses triggered what Jung identified as the mother complex, shifting David's unconscious perception of Sarah from mysterious feminine ideal to nurturing caretaker. The turning point came when Sarah learned to maintain what Jung called witnessing consciousness. Instead of trying to fix David's work stress, she simply reflected, "It sounds like you're really passionate about finding the right solution." Instead of trying to cheer him up, she maintained her own emotional center and allowed him to experience his emotions without interference. Instead of rescuing him from difficult days, she honored his capacity to navigate his own experience. The result was remarkable. David's pursuit behavior immediately intensified. He began seeking her out more frequently, asking deeper questions about her perspectives, and expressing genuine curiosity about her inner world. By maintaining the anima frequency, Sarah had repositioned herself as a source of transformation rather than comfort. Another example involves Maria, a 35-year-old therapist who struggled with what Jung called professional caretaking overflow, the tendency to bring therapeutic energy into romantic relationships. Maria was naturally gifted at creating emotional safety and facilitating healing, but these same qualities triggered the mother complex in potential partners. The breakthrough came when Maria learned to distinguish between her professional role and her feminine essence. In her therapeutic work, she appropriately took responsibility for creating healing environments. But in romantic context, she learned to embody what Jung called sacred witness energy, the ability to hold space for others' growth without directing their process. When Marcus, a colleague, shared his struggle with career decisions, Maria resisted the urge to offer therapeutic insights. Instead, she asked, "What does your intuition tell you about this choice?" This simple shift maintained the anima frequency by honoring his own wisdom rather than positioning herself as the expert. Marcus began pursuing Maria with increasing intensity, drawn to her depth and mysterious feminine wisdom. Consider also the case of Lisa, a 32-year-old artist who naturally embodied the anima archetype in creative contexts but struggled to maintain it in romantic situations. When she was creating art, teaching workshops, or discussing creative philosophy, she naturally inspired others through her authentic expression and creative passion. But when she became romantically interested in someone, she would abandon her creative projects to be more available. The transformation occurred when Lisa learned to maintain what Jung called creative primacy, keeping her creative expression as the central organizing principle of her life. Instead of abandoning her art for romantic pursuits, she invited potential partners to witness her creative process. Instead of being constantly available, she maintained her studio schedule and creative commitments. This shift had a profound impact on her romantic experiences. Men began pursuing her more intensely, drawn to her creative passion and the transformation they experienced in her presence. By maintaining her connection to the creative feminine principle, Lisa naturally embodied the anima frequency that inspired growth and evolution in others. If you're recognizing yourself in any of these patterns, comment below with anima frequency, so I know this content is resonating. There's so much more to explore about Jung's insights into feminine psychology. These examples illustrate that the anima frequency isn't about being perfect or suppressing your caring nature. It's about maintaining your psychological autonomy while remaining open to authentic connection. As you begin to embody Jung's insights about the anima frequency, you'll discover that this isn't just about changing individual behaviors, it's about fundamentally transforming your relationship with your own feminine essence. The women who naturally inspire pursuit behavior have integrated what Jung called the individuated feminine. They've done the psychological work to embody their archetypal feminine power consciously and authentically. This integration process involves what Jung called shadow work, recognizing and reclaiming the aspects of your feminine nature that you've been taught to suppress or hide. Many women have learned to diminish their natural power, mystery, and autonomy in order to be more palatable or acceptable to others. The anima frequency requires reclaiming these qualities and expressing them authentically. The deeper level of this work involves understanding what Jung called the collective feminine wound, the historical and cultural patterns that have disconnected women from their archetypal feminine power. For generations, women have been taught that their worth depends on their ability to please, serve, and emotionally regulate others. The anima frequency represents a return to the sovereign feminine, the woman who knows her own value and doesn't need external validation to feel worthy. This psychological integration also involves what Jung called active imagination, the ability to dialogue with your own unconscious patterns and archetypal energies. Begin to notice when you're operating from fear-based patterns that trigger caretaking energy. These patterns often stem from unconscious beliefs that you need to earn love through service or that you're not valuable unless you're useful to others. The anima frequency emerges naturally when you've done the inner work to heal these wounded patterns. When you truly know your own worth, you don't need to prove it through caretaking. When you're connected to your own life force, you don't need to derive energy from managing others' emotions. When you trust your own feminine wisdom, you don't need to control outcomes through emotional manipulation. Jung's research revealed that the individuated feminine has integrated what he called the 4 feminine archetypes: the maiden, innocence and possibility; the mother, nurturing and creativity; the queen, leadership and sovereignty; and the crone, wisdom and transformation. Women who naturally inspire pursuit behavior can access all 4 archetypes as situations require, rather than being stuck in one pattern. This integration also involves what Jung called animus integration, developing a healthy relationship with your own inner masculine energy. The animus represents your capacity for logic, boundaries, and goal-directed action. When you've integrated your animus, you can maintain clear boundaries, make decisions based on your own values, and pursue your own goals without apology. This inner masculine strength supports your feminine essence and prevents you from collapsing into caretaking patterns. The ultimate integration involves what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposites in creative tension. You can be both nurturing and boundaried, both available and autonomous, both emotional and rational. This psychological wholeness is inherently attractive because it represents the possibility of authentic relationship without codependency. If you're ready to do the deeper work of integrating your feminine essence, the next video explores Jung's specific practices for shadow work and archetypal integration. This is where the real transformation happens. Jung's revolutionary insights into the psychology of attraction reveal that the dynamics governing romantic pursuit aren't random or superficial. They're archetypal patterns embedded in the collective unconscious. When you